All right. Well, according to my watch, it is 1:02 p.m., and I really want to honor our time and give us enough time for our interview. So we're going to get started. A few more people might be joining us, but we're just going to dive in. So if we have not met before, hello, my name is Holly Hooksema. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the career engagement specialist housed at Career Success, and I'm the liaison for the arts division and the humanities division. Meredith, would you be willing to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Holly. My name is Meredith Pelwright. My pronouns are they, them, and I am the Humanities Career Engagement Specialist. So I'm part of just the Humanities team, but work really closely with Holly. It's great to see you all today.
So thanks everybody for being here. We got one other special person on camera, but I'm going to wait and let them introduce themselves in a moment because that will be the bulk of our time together today. Thrilled to have several students with us today. Thank you for carving time out of your busy schedules to come and invest in your professional development. I offer you lots of applause for that. That's an important priority. Today, we have a special guest with us, Dr. Leanne Maunu, and I've got a list of questions that we're going to ask Dr. Maunu. Students, at any point, if you have a question that comes to your mind, you can drop it in the chat. Meredith is going to be minding the chat for us. If we decide, ooh, that's a great question that you should actually ask live at the end, we're going to have a live Q&A at the end. So I'll be kind of interviewing Dr. Maunu for about 30 minutes, and we'll have a full 15 minutes at the end that's just like Q&A as you want. You know, if you want to pick Dr. Manu's brain about anything, anything within reason, that is an appropriate time for it. So I'll be kind of leading verbally. Meredith will be minding things in the chat. We are recording as well, so just a word to the wise about that. So let's dive in, Dr. Manu. Thank you for being here. Thank you for carving time out of your busy schedule to be here and be with us. We really appreciate that. Before we dive into our questions, would you just introduce yourself and what your current role is and where it is?
Hi everyone, welcome, and I'm so happy to be here. So my name is Leanne Maunu. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm currently Dean of Languages and Literature at Palomar College, which is a community college in North San Diego County. And I've been in this position for almost 2 years. Right after Memorial Day will be 2 years. But I taught here for 21 years and taught in total 29 years in English as English faculty. So excited for today.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. We're just excited to ask you some questions and hear about your experience and all of that. Would you take a moment, Dr. Manu, just to briefly describe your career trajectory from, when you completed your undergraduate, where did you go after that, and kind of what's the trajectory that led you to where you're at right now?
So I started at UCSD. That's where I did my undergraduate degree, and started out thinking I might be a biology major or a political science major. And then I think I was kind of denying that I loved my love for literature, or like, what can I do with that degree? I'm a very shy person, and I thought like, oh, the only thing that I could maybe possibly do is teach, and the whole idea of teaching kind of scared me. So I took a bunch of different classes, kind of started down the biology path, switched to political science. I was thinking about going into law. And then finally, I kind of realized, like, no, I really am a humanities person. And so my major from UCSD was I did my bachelor's degree in, at the time, it was called English and American Literature. I think now it's called Literatures in English. And then I did minors in French literature and political science. And then after that, I took a year off. I knew I wanted to go to graduate school, and but wasn't really quite sure the process, or what that would look like. I was really thinking more graduate school to go into research. And so I ended up applying for PhD programs. And so I did a master's and PhD in English from Indiana University. But I took a gap year and I taught English at a high school in France, which was really great. And then that really kind of solidified that I love, or got me started on the path of teaching. So I taught 29 years, all at the college level, except for 1 year in France at a high school. And like I said, 21 years, I was at Palomar College of that, and then moved into administration when there was a vacancy, and we needed someone to kind of step in as an interim position. So it's interesting because like I said, I didn't really quite think this was going to be my career path, and just kind of wound up in it. When I was a fresh person at UCSD, I had no idea what I wanted to major in. I went to our career center and took a test that, yes, shout out for our amazing career centers. Um, and I took one of those tests that kind of identified, like, oh, these are careers that you might enjoy or be good at. And it gave me a list of 10 careers. And the only 2 that stayed with me are the 2 that at the time I thought, like, "There's no way," and one was teaching, because I thought, "Oh, no way am I" again, I'm very shy, I'm like, "There's no way I could stand up in front of people," and the other one was priest, and I thought, "Well, that, maybe none, but even that," but it was just funny that, sometimes those tasks I think are so important because they can help you really identify where you would be happy and successful. And so even though I was in denial for a couple years, I finally was like, no, this is the path I want to head down. And realizing that, I was like, okay, I'm going to do the English degree. The literature degree. I might not go into teaching at the time. Still wasn't sure, but then I kind of realized, like, no, this is my path, and I really want to pursue teaching. So it's been wonderful.
I love that. Thank you. And that leads us literally like directly into where my brain goes with the next question is what has kept you in this all these years? So I think it's probably the majority of folks in life have a more circuitous path in their career trajectory. It's not just like, hey, I majored in this in college and I ended up doing it, for the bulk of my career. I'm confident that, given, almost 30 years in the industry, you've probably had a moment or two of thinking, do I really want to do this? Do I want to do something else? What has kept you? What has been so good or so, I don't know, fill in the blank, with an adjective? What has been so blank about it that you've decided to stay on this trajectory this whole time? What has kept you in it?
Yeah, I think I really love teaching and working with students. For folks who are thinking about going into teaching, like with your humanities degree, like I remember, so for 5 years before I was hired in my current position, which was a tenure track position, I taught at San Diego State University as an adjunct. And I taught business communication, and I'd bring my students to, again, the career center and every semester, because we do a unit on like, yeah, like resume writing and interviews. And I remember the business career counselor there said, like, high school and elementary school teachers tend to be more extroverts, whereas college faculty tend to be more introverts. And I kind of found that to be true. Like, one thing I love about college teaching is like my husband's a high school teacher, and you're kind of always on. You're always teaching throughout the day. Whereas with college teaching, you get those down periods to like reflect. And so really it is, I feel like every day is different, in the classroom. Working with students is just such a pleasure. And now, for like I said, for almost 2 years, I haven't been teaching. I really miss it greatly. But I love working in education because I think, um, that aspect of like really helping people and, wanting to make a difference and trying to help people find solutions. And so I think really just, figuring out like what your passion is and pursuing it. I know again with humanities degrees, sometimes you get that like, what are you going to do with that degree? But it's so versatile and there's so much you can do with it. A lot of faculty in my department or when I was in English, had worked as copy editors or worked for nonprofits in marketing. And so really, I think just finding your passion. Is really important. For me, like I mentioned, I thought about law school, and what really clinched it for me to go into teaching is I'm like, I can't imagine not talking about literature like every day and talking about writing and ideas and like the life of the mind. And so, like, I know I would get some of that pursuing a different path, but for me, just working in education and was just really important and just has really always motivated me and kept me engaged.
Thank you. Gosh, and that, I mean, literally, this leads like directly to the next question, kind of as we were following the story of your chronology and your trajectory. Why Palomar Community College? You mentioned you worked at San Diego State, which is a bit more of like, traditional four-year university. Tell us a little bit about what you perceive to be the differences between working at a community college versus working at a four-year college, and why have you chosen to stay in community college higher education as opposed to a four-year university?
Yeah, well, I think one of the biggest differences is like with a four-year university, there is that, like they call it the publish or perish, like where you constantly need to be writing scholarly articles and books. And what I love about Palomar is I was just kind of applying broadly. When I finished my doctorate, was applying all across the nation, different four-year schools. But one of the key differences, community colleges really focus more on teaching and service. So working on committees, doing service work. Whereas four-year schools, like I said, there's a lot more focus on research and trying to make sure that you're publishing. So I applied to Palomar. When I went to my first interview, I had two interviews, and I left, and I'm like, oh, I really want that job, because it was a great group of people. I think there were 12 faculty on my hiring committee, so it was huge. But it was just a great group of people, and I just felt so lucky to have landed where I did. Um, you know. Coincidentally enough, my parents both went to Palomar College. They met here. They were both first generation college students. My mom her parents were immigrants from Italy who met in New York. My dad was in the Marines at the time and was stationed at Camp Pendleton here at San Diego. And so I kind of feel like it was meant to be to wind up here. So I think, yeah, like that's one of the key differences, but I think community college too, like, even though the focus isn't as much on research, a lot of community colleges still are encourage that. And so, like, we have sabbaticals where you have a semester off from teaching to pursue research. And the English department here at Palomar is very research focused. I think, probably a good like third of the department has published scholarly books, a lot of articles. We have a lot of faculty who are also doing creative writing, so they teach creative writing. Um, and that's really nice too with community college teaching. Like, at many schools, not all, but like the department culture here is such that nobody owns a class. And so if someone wants to teach, like my specialty is British literature, if I wanted to teach American literature, I probably could have, because we teach the lower division survey courses, not the specialized. I never felt comfortable enough to do that. It's really outside my wheelhouse. But yeah, so for me, I think it just gives you a lot more flexibility, and a lot more focus on your teaching, which I always, which I loved and appreciated.
Thank you for that. That's I mean, that's a great insight, the differences there. Staying on this topic of higher education and careers in higher education, which I know is why several students are here today, is wanting to pursue work as a scholar and as a faculty member in higher education. What does it mean to be dean at a community college, and how is this different? I know you were previously chair of the English department. Like, how is this different from that? Give us just a little snippet, just a little description of kind of the roles outside of traditional, lecturer or, professor. What does it mean to be dean? What does it mean to be department chair? Did you have a favorite, of both that you have done? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so what's surprising to me is I never realized like how many different positions are in higher ed. A lot of director positions, managing special programs like TRIO or EOPS, for low income first generation college students. So if you are interested in like working at a university or working at a college, there's so much out there. There's also a lot of doctorate programs, EDD or PhD programs that will align you like with community college leadership or higher education administration or leadership. I never did that because I didn't think I'd wind up in administration. And yeah, so I was department chair for Department of English Humanities and Reading for 3 years. It was right when COVID started, summer of 2020. So it was very challenging. And then we ended up losing probably, no, not, sorry, to retirement, losing to retirement about probably like a third of our department. Who just decided they didn't want to deal with teaching online during COVID. And my predecessor, I thought, oh, her office was two doors down. I thought I'd be able to lean on her for help as a new department chair, and she retired. So it was definitely a challenge. And with a department chair, you're just kind of managing your department. English is a pretty big department. I think we had at the time, well, we had about 25 full-time faculty, and about maybe 68 or so part-time faculty, and then again, quite a few full-time faculty retired. So you're kind of just navigating the space between administration and faculty. And then we had a vacancy in our dean position. I was trying to get other people to apply. And then people were like, Leanne, why don't you apply for the temporary position, the interim? So I did step in just to help. And so that position is different too. Like you oversee like a whole division. And so whereas before my department was English, Humanities, and Reading, now I oversee the library. So we have 4 libraries at 4 different locations because we have satellite locations. I've got English as a second language, American Sign Language, speech, world languages, so French, Italian, English, humanities, reading. So it's a pretty big division. Um, and in terms of it being different, like like a lot of times people or what I've heard since stepping into this role is deans are almost like middle managers because you are kind of the middle between the executive leadership, the vice president and presidents and president, and then your faculty department chairs. And so I love the work. I do miss being in the classroom, as I mentioned, but I love that idea of still helping and people in different ways, like helping them solve problems. It's definitely an increase in work. Like when I was department chair during COVID, I was still putting in, I don't know, like 10-hour days. It was, it was up until that point, it was definitely the most stressful and busiest period. And now as an administrator, it's consistently about 60 hours a week of work. Um, and little fires bubble up, things that happen like in the classroom or students who might be struggling with like their instructor, something going on in the classroom or a comment that an instructor made or um, something where you might not agree with a grade. And so trying to kind of navigate those spaces and, act as like an intermediary and like bring people together in conversation. So I think that's kind of my favorite part of each is just really like helping people, trying to help people find solutions. Like, okay, here's a problem. How do we solve it together? So that aspect is similar, but it's definitely different just having so many people. And I love though being able to also step outside of my department and get to know like I've known a lot of full-time faculty in my division, but the last 2 years I've like really gotten to know them and really meet everybody, and including our new faculty who are tenure track. And that's been really fun too to be on those hiring committees, hire more classified staff as well. So I really enjoy that aspect, just kind of getting out of my English bubble a little bit more.
That sounds really multifaceted, probably all the pros and all the cons, of like a really varied, multifaceted role. Thank
Mhm.
you. So I want to pivot us a tiny bit away from, kind of the interview of you and your history and your trajectory and move us more into the space of, we've got several students on this meeting. Let's talk about, your vast amounts of wisdom, and certain things that you might want to share with students about their life and their trajectory, and where they might be going. I think the first one I'd want to ask is what qualities would you encourage a student to cultivate if they want to be successful as a scholar or a professor, somehow if they're wanting to work in academia, what can they be cultivating? What characteristics can they be cultivating within themselves now, even as an undergraduate?
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's such a great question. I think first of all, like time management's really important. And managing your time and being independent. When you if you for those folks who are interested in going into a PhD program, I know at my school, Indiana University at the time, the average from to get your master's and PhD was 12 years in the humanities at Indiana University, and I think the overall average is about 10 years. So it's a long time. And so you take your classes for your master's, for your PhD, and then it becomes a lot of independent work. And so you really have to figure out how to manage your time well. You have to be self-disciplined in terms of thinking about, just yeah, just keeping on track, keeping focused. As part of that too, I think like a biggest piece of advice, it's not really a quality, but it's just really find a topic that you're passionate about and excited. Because even if you're just thinking, oh, I'm going to do a master's, I might not do a PhD, you're going to be working pretty intensely on a project for, again, anywhere from like 2 to 10 years, 2 to 12 years. And so you've got to choose something like you're really excited about that you just like really want to find out more. And so kind of in line with that too is like cultivating that intellectual curiosity. Like start thinking now, like what do you love? What are you excited about? Is it like your general humanities class? Is it like ancient Greek history? Is it 20th century American literature, right? What is it that you're really excited about? And really just think about, pursuing that passion because, oftentimes, again, people go into a field because they think like, oh, this is um, something that is going to be a good career or a stable career. And people also do that in the humanities where they think, oh, this is a trendy topic. Believe it or not, right? There are trendy topics in like Shakespearean studies or something. So it might be trendy, but it might not be something you're really excited about. And so I think to find something that you're excited about is really, really important and making sure that it's something that's going to sustain you for the long haul. So I think, yeah, time management, self discipline, really cultivating intellectual curiosity and passion towards what you're excited about.
Those are great, great notes. Yeah, I'm finding myself in yes, totally. And working in career success, as we work with students who are thinking about going to graduate school, I'm always like, yes, these are similar things that I coach students on. Well, on that note, of thinking about graduate school, if you were talking with a student, whether they're at Palomar or, here on this meeting that's considering graduate school, whether it's for a career in academia or just graduate school, for something else. What do you recommend they do as an undergraduate, now to prepare for going into graduate school? I mean, you'd mentioned time management, you'd mentioned picking a topic that you actually like. Anything else, as they're staring down graduate school that you would offer?
Yeah. So two things I can think of is like first of all, just take a wide range of classes. Again, kind of in keeping with that theme of like intellectual curiosity, like so you can see all the different disciplines, or again, if you know like you want to go down like a pure humanities track or a literature track, right? You can just kind of see what's out there because then when you go to apply for graduate programs, if you're thinking about a PhD, normally when you apply, you don't just send out a ton of applications. You try to really target it and say, I want to go to this school because I want to work with this particular scholar. So for me as an undergraduate, I always, again, was denying that doing a literature degree. And I always knew I loved like 18th century, early 19th century literature. So once I settled on, okay, I'm doing the literature degree, then I took as many 18th century and Romanticism classes as I could as an undergraduate. And then when it came time to apply for those PhD programs, I could say like, okay, I've taken this number of classes. I did my honors thesis on education and Wordsworth and Mary Wollstonecraft and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, like try to pull in my French literature minor as well. So I think really just kind of taking that broad perspective really helps you see what's out there. And I think my other piece of advice as well too to prepare for graduate school is really start cultivating relationships with your professors now. Take multiple classes with them. Like if you I just fall in love with like the teaching style of one of your professors, just keep taking classes. Go to their office hours. I know that can be really intimidating, and I always felt that way like, oh, I'm bothering them. They're working on something. But office hours are really there to support you and for the professors to be available to talk with you. And that's a good way to get to know them outside of class, especially if you do have larger classes. When I went to UCSD, my lower division literature classes were, those big lectures with like 150, 200 people. And then we had a teaching assistant 1 day a week. But then even as I got up to my upper division classes, I still had some that were maybe 60 people in a class. And then I did have some smaller ones that were maybe like 20, 25 people. But going to office hours is really good so that you can talk with your faculty, your professors, and get to know them. And then that helps you later on too, because they can advise you as to which graduate schools to apply to. So I mentioned like, my parents were first generation college students. Um, I was after my parents, I'm really the only one of my cousins, and was of my siblings to have a bachelor's degree. No one had gone into higher ed, so I had no idea how that works. I didn't know what a master's was. I didn't really know what a PhD was. And two of my professors that were really my mentors, helped advise me, and they're like, okay, these are the schools you should go to. This is where scholars are working in romanticism, and then they can help write you the recommendation letters that you'll need as well, which is also really important too. So I think just kind of starting to cultivate those relationships and try to think about the guidance that your professors can really prepare you for too. So I think those would be my biggest two pieces of advice.
That's great. Thank you. And I will echo as someone that works in career success all the time. I work with students who are like, I need to apply to grad school, but how do I get the letters of rec? I'm like, in theory, we were building these relationships for years. We're not just waiting till the last minute being like, hello, professor, I don't really know you. Will you write me a letter of recommendation, please? So yes, I think cultivating those relationships is wise. Well, we're coming in on the tail end of our specific questions for you, but the last one, it's in that same vein of like, hey, what types of advice would you give if someone is just generally interested in pursuing a career in academia in general? What advice would you give to them? But then, kind of secondly, if there's anyone that is specifically interested in pursuing literary scholarship or academic leadership, which is kind of both, of the roles that you hold, what advice would you give to any of those three categories, whether, academia in general, specific to literary scholarship, or specific to higher ed leadership? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I think kind of what I was like saying is start thinking about your interests, like what you might want to pursue. You definitely don't have to have that dialed in when you apply to graduate school. So even though like I was saying, for me, I was like, okay, I went to Indiana University because I applied there because there were a couple romanticism scholars who I wanted to work with who ended up being on my dissertation committee. Um, but starting on that now, also, if you are going to go into humanities, start thinking about your world languages that you might need. Most PhD programs, you're going to have two languages, two world languages besides English. Um, it used to be more traditional to have a modern language and an ancient language like Greek or Latin. Um, oftentimes, like at Indiana University, I just love languages. So I mentioned I did a French literature minor. I also took 2 years of Italian as an undergrad, just to because I'm half Italian and I love learning languages. So at Indiana, I was able to pass out of the Italian portion, and then I did a PhD minor in French. But I think starting on your language, it can be really important. um, and then I would say it's not too soon to start researching the various programs and then find out what they offer in terms of teaching opportunities. Will you be able to start teaching right away, which usually will cover your tuition, which is really important. Look at the professor to student ratios. Grad programs are usually pretty small, so your graduate classes will be maybe like a seminar might be like 8 people, and then you might have larger classes that are about 20. You could also look at job placement as well. And this is too, also when you're researching programs where cultivating those relationships with your faculty will help because like I said, they can help you, know like, okay, UC Riverside is really well known for their American Lit program. And so starting to kind of get that information, you could start looking at those schools and thinking about, okay, these are some of my schools I'm interested in applying to. And just to kind of, give you an example, when you start researching the programs, like one thing for me at Indiana, why I went there is so I applied for directly for the PhD program. Some schools you have to apply for the MA, the master's, and then the PhD, and that slows you down. And another thing too is that we didn't have to do a master's thesis. So it was like 2 years of coursework, and then you started immediately in the PhD. And that also helped streamline things a little bit more quickly. I mentioned a minute ago too, like Indiana, we did a PhD minor. And so I did a PhD minor in French. So I took 4 graduate level French classes, which was a little intimidating because I was in these classes with French PhDs. But I love that because again, French is one of my passions that I love. And then I was able to incorporate that into my doctorate. Like I said, we had to do two languages, which is pretty standard in an English program or humanities PhD. But with the second one could be reading level, so I just passed out of the Italian exam, but they had, like, some basic courses that you could take. I also was able to get a fellowship, and that guaranteed me teaching, it guaranteed me, a fellowship, so my tuition my first year was free. And then what I also loved about it, which I didn't know at the time, but at Indiana University, we weren't teaching assistants, we actually taught our own classes, and we taught composition, so, fresh person writing. And that was awesome because a lot of programs you start as a teaching assistant, which is still great. And it's a wonderful way to get your feet wet, but you work with a professor, they teach the class, you teach the discussion sections. And, in IU, they just we had, like, a quick 2-week over the summer, like, "All right, we're gonna throw you in there to teach, composition." And then we had, like, another graduate student who was a mentor, and we met with them in small groups every week. But I love that because it was just that opportunity to, like, jump in and have my own classroom right away, try to figure out all those elements of teaching as well too. So again, talking to people can really give you advice. Talking to your professors can really help as well too. Um, and as far as academic roles, if you are thinking about going into a leadership role rather than do the scholarship, there are again doctorates in education, DDDs, that are really focused on community college leadership, higher ed leadership. But if you want to go the pure, academic route, there always are going to be these opportunities to try out other things. So, before I was department chair for 2 years, I ran our writing center. I was our writing center director, our tutoring center for writing. I also, for 4 years, was our professional development coordinator. So I did all our professional development and back to school orientations for all our faculty at the college. And as part of that, for 2 years, I was the director of a consortium with Cal State San Marcos and another community college, Maricosta. And so I've always liked that. Like I haven't just been in the classroom or just doing my research. I've also had the opportunity to try out some things and use that different skill set. So, and that's true even at four-year universities. When I was at Indiana or San Diego State, a lot of the faculty would, teach, but then do other things that were like quasi-administrative or administrative roles. So I think there's a lot of flexibility that you can do too. I think that's the lovely thing about academia is there's a lot of jobs out there that you might not even know exist. And then once you start looking, you'll find that there's just a lot that you can do if you're interested in that career path. So.
That's so great, thank you. I feel like that I asked you a lot in that question, but you really hit all the different niches. Thank you. We're gonna pivot. Dr. Manu, while we take a deep breath, because I'm gonna invite students to ask questions in a moment, would you be willing, I realize I didn't ask you, I was gonna ask you at the beginning, would you be willing to drop in the chat here on Zoom your website? Because I was realizing if you'll do that, students who are on this call, Dr. Manu has done a lot of research, had papers published, et cetera, et cetera. And those are all linked in various aspects on her website. So if you're curious, she's talking about all this like writing this and writing that and like research that has to be done. If you're wanting to take a look at that, there you go. That link is there. And I've explored her website extensively and there's all sorts of cool stuff. There's all sorts of great career links on there that I was thrilled to explore for humanities majors and what can you do with this and with that. So there's a lot of good things on there. And I just encourage you, if you're interested in anything that Dr. Manu has said, go to her website and start poking around because I found it to be kind of this cool treasure hunt of like, oh, I didn't know this would be on. That's cool. So just, oh yes, and there's email address if you've got any questions and you want to email Dr. Manu. But I want us to pivot now. Students, thank you so much just for, great attention and all of that goodness. We've got 10 minutes left just for a nice open Q&A. If there's anything you're like, well, what about this or what about that? And the good news is we're a nice small group right now. So you can actually ask your questions, and not be sheepish like I'm asking this in front of 100 people. Like it's just us. It's a small intimate group. So if you want to ask questions in the chat, great. If you want to unmute yourself, that's great as well. There's lots of options here for everybody. So if you have a question, fire away.
Yeah, so talk about work-life balance at different stages of your education career, PhD, teaching, chair, etc. Yeah, that's a great question. It definitely
That's a
ebbs
great
and
question.
flow. Um, right now, I have to, to be totally truthful, work-life balance is hard. You know, I think, finding like when you're working on your PhD or in graduate school, that can be a challenge, but I think a lot of graduate programs are really supportive of you. For me, I was able to focus on teaching, but, so I lived in Indiana for 3 years, and then moved back to San Diego. And I was actually teaching 5 classes a semester and writing my dissertation at the same time, when I was at San Diego State. But, my department chair was awesome because he was very supportive. He knew, we'd moved back to San Diego to be closer to my family, and, he gave me a teaching schedule, so I was only teaching 3 days a week. So, the 3 days a week I was teaching, they're pretty full days, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And then the other days, and then a weekend was like my dissertation days. And so I'd wake up, early in the morning, write, just really focus on that. And so being in graduate school, um, I was able to balance that. Teaching in general, like the weeks that you have grading, oh boy, you got no social life. You're focused, because grading is really challenging. It's, grading, I love grading because it's fun to see students' ideas, but it's very isolated work, and it can be really hard. And those weeks when you have a lot of essays coming in or exams, depending on what you might go into teaching, that can be really hard, but usually a little bit more balanced. I think one of the wonderful things about teaching higher ed is you have a lot more flexibility. So, I mentioned like my husband teaches high school, so he's got to be there at like, 8 o'clock every morning till I think 3:45. Whereas if you teach in higher ed, community college or 4 year, you've got a lot of flexibility. So like I usually worked at home on Fridays, or if I was done teaching at 2 o'clock, I could go home. And then, people who are night owls, right, can grade at night or in the morning. So there's a lot more flexibility. If you go into administration, you're a lot more locked in. So, my meetings usually start around 9 every day. I'm a morning person, so I get in around 7:30, and then I'm usually here till about 6. And being department chair also was challenging, but I think it was because it was during COVID. So it was really, yeah, that was just a really challenging time, I think, for everybody. So I think you'll find that there's just kind of different ebbs and flows of your life. And, if you go to graduate school, usually most graduate programs are really good about making sure that you do have good work-life balance. And they'll usually, again, support you with teaching and by providing teaching opportunities. And that takes care of some of that stress of, the financial worries and concerns. So yeah, so Kathleen, I hope that kind of answers answers that a bit.
That's a great question, and one that, I'm sure is on anyone's mind as they're looking into going into a career is like, "Hey, how can I do what I love and not burn myself out completely?" Awesome. Anybody else? We got just a few minutes left, but I wanna leave space if anybody has another question.
Yeah, and Alexandra asked, do you have any advice or experience with non-teaching jobs you can pursue with a literature BFA?
Great
Um,
question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on my website that Holly referenced, and sorry, it's really out of date. I haven't updated it for 2 years, but there are a ton of good articles because I when I started here at Palmer, I started an English majors club, and so we like went every fall. We did like a session on like applying to transfer to 4 year universities like UCs and CSUs, and we always did something about like non-teaching jobs. I think that's what's so wonderful is it's a wonderful what they call paraprofessional degree. So if you are interested in like law school, one of my friends when I was an undergrad at UCSD, he was a French literature major and he applied to medical school. And when it came time to take the MCATs, he knocked it out of the park on like the written component of the MCAT. And medical schools loved him because, humanities, right? We're good with language and writing and people skills and soft skills. So there's so much out there. That the former Chargers football team head coach was an English major. So marketing, website development. I know Meredith mentioned linguistics. Linguistics is huge right now for like if you did want to pursue something like a master's degree with your literature degree, working in a nonprofit, going into marketing. So on my website, I do have a section, English majors group, and it's resources for English majors. And I can drop a couple of these links. So some of the articles might be a little bit out of date, but but that one's got some good articles or like just general career resources. And then let me drop this one in as well too. This is more specifically for literature and English degrees too. And just different resources. Like University of Washington has a great website that has a whole careers for English majors page. Stanford had one, careers with an English or literature degree. So there are a lot of good things out there, and again, leaning into your career center too, finding out, taking yeah, taking assessments to try to figure out like what your areas of strength are. But your areas of strength will definitely be communication, writing, all those ideas. So, and I think doing any internships you can would be another bit of advice as well too. Like if you can tap in and get like an internship or part-time job, working at a nonprofit or working at a company doing like technical writing or editing or things like that. And that way, when you finish your degree, you can, you've got a little bit of experience under your belt too. So, yeah.
I'm
That's
going to jump
great.
in
Thank you. Yeah.
very quickly. Oh, sorry, Holly, do you mind?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Just wanted to jump in really quickly to follow up on that excellent point about internships. I just dropped in the chat, a link to the website for the Humanities Excel program, which is an internship program we have here in the Humanities Division that is for humanities majors and minors only. And applications have just opened in the last week and are open until early May. So definitely check that out. There are a lot of positions that are in the exact kinds of things that Leanne was just talking about. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me.
I love this. I'm having such a good time, but I just looked at the clock and thought, oh my gosh, okay, we're supposed to be done. Dr. Maunu, thank you. This is, I mean, it's informative, it's helpful, it's all the good things. Students, Meredith and myself work here at UCSC. We are both career counselors and both focused on that for humanities majors, so don't hesitate to connect with us, get a hold of us, all of that. I'm dropping a link in the chat here, students, if you'd be willing to fill out just a quick survey. We really want your feedback about these one-on-one interviews that we're doing. We call them kind of campus to career interviews that we're doing with various professionals. We love your feedback there. You are welcome to email Dr. Maunu. You are welcome. I'm going to put my email in the chat here. Meredith, I'm sure you can do the same. You can email all of us if you have any questions or you want, any further info. This is what we do. Like all three of us, we're here for students. Like that's what we get excited about. That's what we love. So don't let us be bored. You use us. That is the whole reason we exist. Dr. Maunu, do you want to say anything else before we sign off?
No, just yeah, it was an absolute pleasure chatting today, and hopefully it was helpful. I think just finding different your passions. I think is really just a, key takeaway. Just trying to find out what you really love and that you're excited to do. And please don't be shy. Reach out, send me an email if I can. If you think of something later on or have any follow up questions. Like I said, I love working with students, and whatever I can do to help, I'm happy to. So don't be shy. If even a month from now you have a question that pops up that I can help with, I'd be happy to help. So yeah, my
Fantastic.
absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me today.
Yes, Dr. Maunu, thank you again. Students, this marks the end of our time, so you are welcome to log off. We look forward to seeing you at a future event. Meredith and Dr. Maunu, if you'd stick around just for a minute, and then we will close out together.
Thanks.